Hello everybody, doing my Sunday morning musings way in the back end of my property here. Oh, enjoy the day. From my understanding, it's the last nice warm and sunshiny day that we're going to have for a while. The rains move in and the cooler temperatures too. Fall, love it, just love it. Thought what I'd do today is take a quick look through the scripture texts that we had all this past week. And when you do that, it almost seems like no matter where you go in scripture, there's something kind of interesting, something kind of weird or funky about all the different passages that we have. So I'd like to highlight just a couple of those that we had from this past week. So I have my notes in front of me here, so I'll be looking down every now and then. First is the text we had from Ezekiel, in which Ezekiel quotes a proverb. The parents ate sour grapes and the children's teeth were set on edge. So it's not the parents' teeth that were set on edge, it was the kids. In other words, they paid for the price of whatever their parents did. The parents ate sour grapes. It was a parable, a little proverb type saying that was going around in his day. You know what's interesting though? Jeremiah says the same thing. Now, their time in Israel overlapped just a little bit. Jeremiah was first. He was prophesying as the people were getting ready to go into exile, and he ended up dying in Egypt, whereas Ezekiel was one of the ones carried away into exile. A little bit of an overlap of their ministries. Who quoted from who? Who stole that proverb from the other one? Or was it just in circulation that everybody knew it? Parents ate sour grapes. The children's teeth were set on edge. All right, first interesting little thing. How about the Exodus 17 passage that we had? And again, that's where Moses strikes the rock and the rock spews forth water, and so the people are saved out there in the wilderness. It's interesting, isn't it, about Moses' staff? It's an instrument of death early on in Exodus when he touches the Nile with that rod and it turns to blood and it becomes unpotable. And now it becomes an instrument of life. Strikes the rock, out comes good, clean, living waters. But the other interesting thing about the story, it's where the people were journeying from before this incident happened. Literally, they were journeying from the wilderness of sin, S-I-N. Not sin as in doing bad things, but that's just the name of the place, sin, S-I-N. The little thing there, it's kind of cool. How about these different psalms? Psalm 25, where, since we're talking about sins, the psalmist, it's a lament, and the psalmist is saying, please don't remember the sins of my youth, nor my transgressions. Now, in Hebrew poetry, which a lot of the psalms are, there's a lot of parallelism where you say one thing and then you repeat that line or stanza, just saying it a little bit differently. You would think, well, that's one of them, right? Please don't remember the sins of my youth nor my transgressions. Well, not really, not in this instance, because the Hebrew word for transgressions it was something pretty awful, pretty horrible. Not just your garden variety sins. This was some bad thing that you did that had some serious consequences. So, hey, please God, just forget about that I did it, please. Interesting. Then you get to Psalm 78. Psalm 78, 72 verses long. One of those really long historical psalms that talks about the history of the people of Israel, and especially focusing on their journey through the wilderness and into the promised land, which is what this does. But you know what? You would think it'd be a nice flowing narrative. No, it's a broken record. All that the psalmist is focusing on is this, and it just repeats. The people complain, God rescues them, gives them what they need, they're happy, then they forget, and they start complaining again. God rescues them, they have what they need, then they're happy, they forget, and start complaining again. Over again. It's like it never, ever ends. Are our lives sometimes like that? I hope not. All right. Then how about us moving into Paul's letter to the Philippians? One of the most awesome letters that Paul wrote. Beautiful quotes that we get from it and use quite a lot, and just full of good stuff to dwell on and live by. Well, in our text for this week from Philippians chapter 2, Paul starts out in a way that would have him failing English Literature 101. If he went to any college or even in high school, if you called it English Lit 101, he would fail miserably. Why? There are 4 verses at the beginning of chapter 2. He makes it into one long run-on sentence. Just goes on and on and on. And Paul does this elsewhere in some of his writings too. It just never ends. You and I, if we did that, we would be failing. Or else we'd get our paper back from the teacher saying, fix it. And you know what? Our English translations fix it. Each verse is one sentence. Not with Paul. All right, but let's give it to Paul. He wasn't writing in English. He was writing in Greek. And that was something that happened occasionally, not all the time, but was a common thing. One long run-on sentence. Finally, we get to our text from Matthew. Now this is a little weird. It's the story of the vineyard, and the owner of the vineyard had a couple sons and he needed some work done out there, and he asked the one son, hey, would you please go out and help me? And the son goes, Dad, get lost. I'm right in the middle of a video game. Well, wasn't really a video game, but he said, no, I'm too busy. I got other things to do. But later on he thinks, oh man, why did I say that? And he goes out and he works in the vineyard. Whereas the second son says, oh yeah, I'll be right there, and never shows up. All right. Later Greek texts, ones that we know were written later, copied later, as the Greek scribes and some of the monks would sit down and remember, it was all done by hand. They didn't like the order, and they reversed the order of the sons. And it more closely matched up some of the writings with that of the prodigal son story in Luke. Even use some of the language. It's like, why did they do that? It's called editorializing, and there's a lot of that happens in Scripture, especially with some of the later scribal notes that are put in there. It's an interesting part of Bible study, and you have to pay attention to that, because some of that editorializing made it into some of our earlier translations of the Scriptures from the Greek and Hebrew and even the Latin into our English. Gotta keep an eye on it. There they were, added already, Matthew 21. So, what does it all mean? It means, hey, it's fun to study the Bible. It's fun to dig deep into some of the different nuances and some of the interesting little translations and things like that. And sometimes by doing that, it brings out a deeper, more fuller meaning for us and how we can apply it to our lives today. And sometimes it's just kind of something interesting to look at. So, next time you're traveling back from the wilderness of sin, where have you been? Just realize, when the Israelites did that, it had nothing to do with doing bad stuff. Although, in a way, they had been doing bad stuff. God's blessings be with you. Enjoy this wonderful day.